She grabbed my arm so hard I felt her nails through my sleeve. Her eyes were wide, not wide like surprise, wide like she had seen something she couldn't unsee. And she said 4 words so quietly I almost didn't hear them over the noise of boarding passengers and rolling luggage carts. "Sir, get off. Now." I thought she was joking. I actually smiled. And then I looked at her face again, and I have never moved so fast in my life. I want to tell you this story because it changed everything. Not just the obvious thing, not just the fact that I am standing here alive to tell it. It changed what I understood about love, about fear, about how long a person can hold a wound they refuse to name. I've been sitting with this for months, trying to figure out how to say it right. I don't think I can say it perfectly, but I need to say it. My name is Marcus Delaney. I'm a 51-year-old logistics supervisor from the Cascade Heights neighborhood in southwest Atlanta. I am not a dramatic man. I don't have a podcast. I don't post inspirational quotes. I go to work. I cut my grass on Saturdays. I call my sister on her birthday. I am ordinary in almost every way except for one thing. I raised my daughter Deja completely alone from the time she was 13 years old, and for the last 2 years, I had been slowly, quietly losing her. Not to drugs, not to a bad person, just to distance. The kind of distance that builds up between two people who both love each other too much to admit they have no idea how to talk anymore. Deja's mother, my wife, Renee, died in a car accident on I-285 on a Tuesday afternoon in October. Deja was in 8th grade. She wore her mother's earrings to the funeral and she hasn't taken them off since. That's the kind of person my daughter is. She holds on to things. She always has. The problem is, she holds on to hurt the same way she holds on to love. Quietly, completely, and for a very long time. After we lost Renee, I made a decision, and I made it fast, the way men do when they're terrified and trying not to show it. I was going to protect Deja from everything, every bad choice, every wrong turn, every person who might disappoint her. I was going to be so present, so steady, so watchful that nothing would ever hurt her again the way losing her mother hurt her. I see now what I was really doing. I was trying to keep from losing the only person I had left, but I didn't know how to say that, so I just held on. Tighter and tighter, and the tighter I held, the more she pulled away. By the time she was 24 and living in Savannah, we were talking maybe twice a month. Stiff calls, surface level. How's work? How's the car running? Okay, I'll let you go. I told myself that's just what happens when your kids grow up. Normal. Natural. I was lying to myself. You know that kind of lie, the one that lives in your chest like a low-grade fever you've learned to ignore. 3 days before all of this happened, Deja called me. I thought it was going to be one of those surface calls. But instead, she said, "Dad, I need you to stop calling my friends to check on me. I'm 24. I need you to stop." I told her I was just making sure she was safe. She said, "You make me feel like you don't trust me to live my own life." And then she said something that I haven't been able to get out of my head since. She said, "I love you, but sometimes I feel like you love the idea of protecting me more than you love the actual me." Then she hung up. I sat in my kitchen for 2 hours. Didn't move. Just sat there with the phone face down on the table. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept rolling over and thinking about Renee. About how the last thing she ever said to me was, "Don't forget, Deja has a dentist appointment Thursday." Just ordinary. Just a Tuesday. And then she was gone. And I thought, what if that call was my last real conversation with Deja? What if she goes to bed tonight feeling like her father doesn't trust her, doesn't see her, doesn't know her? I got up at 2 a.m. and I booked a flight from Hartsfield-Jackson to Savannah. Departure 7:40 a.m. I was going to show up at her door. Not to argue, not to defend myself, just to stand there and say, "I heard you. I'm sorry. I love you more than I know how to show." I stopped at the Walgreens on Campbellton Road on the way to the airport. I bought Deja's favorite thing, those white cheddar Cheez-Its she's been eating since she was 10 years old, and those orange-flavored Tic Tacs she pops constantly when she's thinking. Stupid things, small things, but sometimes small things say what your mouth can't. I had them tucked in my jacket pocket when I walked through the terminal. I had a speech rehearsed in my head. Something about how I know I've been overbearing. Something about how losing her mother made me afraid in a way I never dealt with. Something honest. Something true. I found my seat 14C, and I put my bag in the overhead and I sat down and I started running through what I'd say to her. The plane was about half full. People were settling in. Someone nearby was already asleep. And I was thinking, I wonder if she'll be angry that I just showed up. I wonder if she'll roll her eyes. I was hoping she'd cry. the way she used to cry when she was little, and we'd make up after an argument, that full body, relieved kind of crying that meant the worst was over. Then I heard fast footsteps. I looked up and a flight attendant was walking toward me, not walking, moving, the way people move when they're trying not to run and failing. Her face was arranged in something that was trying to be calm and couldn't quite get there. She leaned down to my row and she said, very quietly, "Sir, I need you to come with me right now." I said, "I'm sorry?" She said, and I will never forget how her voice sounded, "Please collect your things. We need you to exit the aircraft immediately." I laughed. I actually laughed. I said, "Ma'am, is something wrong?" And that's when she put her hand on my forearm. Not a guiding touch, a grip. And I looked up at her face one more time, and what I saw there, I cannot describe it, except to say that it was the face of someone who knew something I didn't, and what she knew had frightened her completely. I stopped talking. I picked up my bag. I didn't ask another question. I walked off that plane with my heart slamming in my chest and my legs doing the walking while my brain was still trying to catch up. They took me to a small area off the main gate. A man in a navy vest, airport security, I think, sat across from me and said they couldn't discuss details, but that I needed to remain in the area and stay calm. Stay calm. Like he'd said a funny thing. I sat there checking my phone, checking the gate window, checking my phone again. My mouth had gone completely dry. Then I heard it. The announcements first, authoritative and urgent in that flat airport voice that usually means nothing and now meant everything. Then the noise in the terminal changed. That particular sound of people shifting from confusion to fear. I stood up and I looked through the glass and I saw people running. Not jogging, running. And then the big screens that usually showed departure times flashed over to breaking news. And the crawler at the bottom of the screen said, "Flight 2247 declared emergency. Critical mechanical failure. Aircraft grounded." That was my flight. I stood at that window and I could not move. I watched families in the terminal grabbing each other. A woman near a coffee kiosk sank to her knees. A man my age was on his phone, saying something over and over. I couldn't hear the words through the glass, but I could see his face and I understood every single one of them. I pressed my hand flat against the window glass. Cold. I could feel it cold on my palm. And the only thought in my head, the only thought, no room for anything else, was Deja. What if I had never gotten off? What if she went to bed tonight thinking the last thing we said to each other was that argument? What if she had to stand at a funeral the way she stood at her mother's, wearing my cufflinks, the way she wore Renee's earrings, holding on because I was gone and that was all she had left? I need you to understand that I am not a man who cries in airports. But something cracked open in me at that window. Something that had been sealed shut for 10 years. And when it opened, it didn't feel like weakness. It felt like finally telling the truth. I tried calling Deja 4 times. No answer. It was barely 8 a.m. She was probably asleep. The 5th time, her voicemail picked up, and I said, with my voice doing things voices do when you've just come face to face with your own disappearance, "Baby girl, it's Dad. Something happened at the airport and I'm okay. I need you to hear that first. I'm okay. But Deja, I need to hear your voice. Please call me back. I love you. I love you more than I've known how to show you, and I'm going to do better. Please call me." I hung up and stared at the phone. I didn't wait for another flight. I couldn't sit in that airport for another second. I walked to the rental car kiosks, and I put a silver Chevy Malibu on my credit card, and I drove out of Hartsfield-Jackson, headed south on I-75 toward Savannah. 4.5 hours. It was a Tuesday morning. The sun was just coming up hard and orange over the pine trees on both sides of the highway, that particular Georgia light that looks like the whole world is about to catch fire. And I had nothing but road and time and my own thoughts. I thought about every argument. I thought about the time she was 19 and she wanted to take a solo trip to New Orleans with her friends, and I said absolutely not, and I didn't even explain why I just said no, like she was still a child I could simply prohibit. I thought about the calls where I'd asked her 3 times if she'd locked her car, and she'd gone quiet in that way. She goes quiet when she's done trying to get me to understand something. I thought about how many times I had called her friends to check on her, thinking I was being a good father, never once considering what it communicated to her that I didn't trust her, that I didn't believe she could handle her own life. And I thought about Renee. I thought about how Renee used to say, "Marcus, you love that girl with a closed fist." She didn't mean it mean. She meant I needed to learn how to love with an open hand. I never quite understood what she meant until I was doing 4.5 hours on a Georgia interstate at 70 miles an hour with nothing to look at but pine trees and regret. I stopped once, in a town called Unadilla, for gas and a cup of coffee I didn't taste. I sat in the parking lot for 5 minutes with the engine running, staring at nothing. A man loved his daughter so completely that he smothered her. A man was so afraid of loss that he became the thing she needed to get away from. That was me. I had become the thing she needed to escape. I pulled up to her apartment complex in Savannah just before noon. A low, quiet set of buildings near Forsyth Park, with big live oak trees dripping Spanish moss over the parking lot. I had been here once, when she first moved in. She had shown me around nervously, watching my face like she was afraid I'd find something to criticize. I hadn't been back since. I sat in the car for a long moment, long enough for the air conditioning to start feeling cold, long enough to lose my nerve twice and find it again. I knocked on her door. I heard movement inside. A pause. Then the door opened and Deja was standing there in her gray sleep shorts and her old Spellman sweatshirt, hair wrapped, eyes still puffy, holding her phone, and she looked at me with an expression I have been trying to find the right word for ever since. It wasn't anger. It wasn't annoyance. It was something underneath both of those things. Something that looked, for just a second, like relief, like a held breath finally let out. She said, "Dad, what are you?" And I didn't let her finish. I pulled her into me. Both arms all the way I used to hold her when she was small enough that her feet left the ground. She stiffened for just a second, 1 second, and then she went completely still. And then her hands came up around my back. And we stood in her doorway like that, this 51-year-old man and his 24-year-old daughter, just breathing. I was shaking. I could feel myself shaking and I couldn't stop it, and I didn't try. She could feel it too. She pulled back and looked at my face and said, "Dad, what happened?" And I told her. All of it. The flight attendant, the grip on my arm, the walk off the plane, the window and the news screens and the families grabbing each other in the terminal, and me pressing my hand against that cold glass thinking about her. I told her about the 4 calls that went to voicemail. I told her about the drive down with the pine trees and the sunrise and Renee's voice in my head saying love with an open hand. By the time I finished, Deja had tears running down both sides of her face. She wasn't sobbing, she was crying the way adults cry when they're trying not to and failing. She reached across the couch and took my hand in both of hers. And she said, barely above a whisper, "I don't know what I would have done, Dad. I don't know what I would have done." Honestly, that broke me more than anything else. Not because she said it, because I heard it. I really, truly heard what she was saying underneath it. You matter to me more than I've been able to show you. We talked for the rest of that day. And into the evening. And past midnight. We talked the way we hadn't talked since she was maybe 15 and would fall asleep on the couch next to me watching those old detective shows Renee loved. I told her the truth about what losing Renee did to me. I told her that after the accident I had a recurring dream for almost a year, not a nightmare exactly, just a dream where Deja and I were in a car and I couldn't find the brakes. I told her I had been parenting from that dream ever since. I had been gripping the wheel so hard trying to stop a crash that hadn't happened that I couldn't see I was causing a different kind. She listened to all of it without interrupting. Her face did that thing it does her mother's thing where she goes very still when she's really, truly listening. Then she talked, and what she said rearranged everything I thought I understood. She told me she had been struggling for almost 8 months. The job she'd been so proud of, the marketing position at the firm downtown, she'd been let go in a round of layoffs in February, and she hadn't told me because our last 3 conversations had ended in tension, and she didn't want to hear, "I told you so," even though she knew, she said, she knew I would never actually say it. She had been draining her savings. She'd borrowed money from a friend. She was behind on her car note. And she was tired. Not just financially. Tired in that deep, whole-body way that means a person has been holding everything alone for so long they've forgotten what it feels like not to. She looked at me and said, "I didn't reach out because I didn't want to give you a reason to come in and take over. I wanted to fix it myself. I needed to fix it myself." And then she said something that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. She said, "But I think somewhere underneath that, I was punishing you for all the times you didn't trust me. I wanted you to see I didn't need you." She paused. "But, Dad, I really needed you. I want to stop here and speak to you directly for a moment because if you have ever been the parent in this story, or the child in this story, you know exactly what that moment felt like. You know that particular kind of hurt that comes from realizing the distance between you and someone you love wasn't built out of malice. It was built out of 2 people trying to protect themselves from the same thing, the fear of needing someone who might not show up right. I pulled her into another hug and I said, I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere, and you don't have to have it all figured out." She cried for a long time, the kind of crying that has a lot of old grief mixed into it. I stayed in Savannah for 6 days. We went to the Forsyth Park Farmers Market on Saturday morning. We walked along the riverfront in the evenings. We cooked her mother's red beans and rice recipe from the index card Renee wrote it on, the one I still keep in the kitchen drawer in Cascade Heights. A little greasy now and faded at the edges, but still readable. Deja photographed it on her phone. We ate at her little kitchen table and talked about Renee the way we hadn't been able to talk about her in years, not with the tight grief of people who can't look directly at the thing, but with the warm, aching love of people who finally could. On the last evening before I drove back to Atlanta, Deja sat me down and told me she had made a decision. She had already spoken to a friend about subletting an apartment in East Atlanta close enough to Cascade Heights that we could have Sunday dinners, far enough that she could have her independence, her own life, her own space to grow into herself. She said, "I'm not moving back to be taken care of, Dad. I'm moving back because you're my family and I want us to actually know each other." I nodded. I did not cry in front of her. I waited until I got to the car. The drive back up I-16 felt nothing like the drive down. 6 days ago, I had driven this stretch with my hands white-knuckled at 10 and 2, running on fear and black coffee and the desperate need to undo something. Now the sun was going down pink and gold behind me, the radio was on low, and Deja had texted me 3 times since I backed out of her parking lot, once to tell me to drive safe, once to send me a photo of the Cheez-Its box, still have some left, you overpacked, and once to just send a heart emoji with no words. I have screenshot all 3. Here is what that week taught me, and I want to say it plainly because I think some of you have needed to hear it for a while. Love is not the same thing as control. Protection is not the same thing as presence. The most dangerous thing I ever did for my daughter was make her feel that my love came with conditions, that I trusted her only if she did things my way, that I was proud of her only if she was safe inside the perimeter I built. I thought I was keeping her whole. What I was actually doing was teaching her that she had to carry her breaking down alone, in secret, so she wouldn't confirm my worst fears. That's not a daughter-father relationship. That's a pressure cooker. And pressure cookers eventually give. The mistake most people make is waiting for a crisis to say the true thing. I had a flight attendant with terrified eyes and 100 miles of Georgia interstate to wake me up. You might not get that. Some people don't. Some people get the unanswered phone call and the missed chance, and the rest of their life to wonder what would have happened if they had just shown up before it was too late. So here is what I'm asking you to do today. Not next week. Today. If there is someone you love who you've been circling at a distance, a child, a parent, a sibling, I want you to close this app and call them. Not a text, a call. And when they pick up, say the thing underneath the thing. Not "I've been busy" or "things have been crazy." Say "I miss you, I'm sorry for the distance, I want to do better." That's it. 3 sentences. That's all I needed to say to Deja, and I waited 10 years to say it right. Ask yourself this. What story are the people who love you telling themselves about why you've been so far away? And is that the story you want them to carry? Deja moved into her apartment in East Atlanta 6 weeks ago. Last Sunday, we made her mother's peach cobbler together and watched old episodes of a detective show neither of us had seen, and we sat on her new couch under a blanket and she fell asleep before the 3rd episode was over, the way she used to do when she was little. I watched her sleep for a second, my daughter, grown and whole, and here and I thought about a flight attendant in a Navy uniform at Gate C-12 of Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, and the 4 words she said, and how much those 4 words changed. Drop a comment below and tell me 1, 2, or 3. 1, if you think I waited too long to wake up. 2, if you think Deja could have reached out sooner. 3, if you think we both did exactly what scared people do, and you've been there too. I want to read every single one. And tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now, because these stories reach places I never imagined, and I want to know who's in this room with me. If you've ever had a close call, a moment where something pulled you back from the edge of losing someone you love, tell me what happened. I'll read it, I promise. If this story found you tonight, please share it with one person who needs it. You know exactly who that person is. And if you aren't subscribed yet, come join this community right now. Click that button and turn on notifications, because every story I tell here is trying to say the same thing in a different way. The people in front of you are not guaranteed to be there forever. Don't wait for the terrified flight attendant. Show up now. God bless you. Hold your people tight. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences. Fully rewritten and reimagined in Atlanta, Georgia, to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental. Flight attendant screamed, "Get off." One actually laughed. Then every screen in the airport lit up. Maximum curiosity gap. Flight attendant grabbed my arm with terror in her eyes. I laughed it off and grabbed my bag. Then the breaking news hit every screen and the whole airport started falling apart. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Sir, get off. Now." She was a flight attendant. She was also gripping my arm so hard I felt her nails through my sleeve. I had a boarding pass in my hand that morning. But what I didn't know, what I never once thought to ask, was why her face looked like she had already seen the ending. My name is Marcus. I'm 51 years old. I spent years raising a daughter alone in Southwest Atlanta after losing my wife on a Tuesday afternoon on I-285, the kind of loss that changes how you love everything that's left. And I had been holding on to my daughter so tightly, for so long, that I didn't notice I was the reason she stopped reaching back. On a quiet Tuesday morning in October, a stranger pulled me off a plane and changed the entire direction of my life. 20 minutes later, every screen in that airport told me why. That was the last morning I ever confused protecting someone with trusting them. This is the story of what happens when you survive the thing that was supposed to take you and realize the real emergency was never at the airport. About a 4-hour drive down a Georgia highway at sunrise with nothing but pine trees and 10 years of regret. About a door opening in Savannah at noon and a daughter who hadn't yet decided whether to let me back in. About a recipe card in my kitchen drawer, written in handwriting I will never see again, that finally taught 2 people how to sit at the same table. And about what it costs quietly, completely, when you spend a decade teaching someone that your love is safest kept at a distance.